day, grade 12 learners, and welcome to today's English home language lesson. My name is Vash Suchit, and we're dealing with your revision program as you're writing your cycle tests for March this year. Now, grade 12s, I can understand the nerves are all there and you're really stressed out about everything that's happening with this year. But remember to just be calm and take it step by step. So while you're engaging with your assessments, you may have written already, or you're going to write, the majority of you, in the following week, your cycle test for English. And that's going to be a test, basically, that's going to deal with your comprehension, your summary, your language conventions and structures, dealing with adverts, cartoons, and editing of language. Now, that could be either a test out of 40, maybe 35, or even 70 as a full-scale paper brought down to give you the mark that's required for this task 5. So we're going to look at all of the aspects that you need to familiarize yourself with when you are being assessed, particularly with section C, that's your cartoons and adverts. So when we look at paper 1, remember there is that split of the comprehension, the summary in section B, and then section C, which is, as I mentioned, those 3 aspects, okay? Now, you need to obviously take your time that's allocated to you and look at it in terms of how you're going to work out the minutes that you're going to work with each of those questions and sections. Right, so when we're looking at English home language, we have to remember this aspect called Barrett's taxonomy. Now, the only way the examiner is going to be able to understand whether you have learned that skill or not is by testing you in terms of your cognitive levels of understanding. Now we move between the easy, the medium, and the difficult levels of questioning, and there's certain words that you should have been affair with right now as you are in grade 12. All right, so with the level 1 questioning, we're looking at basically, can you recall information from a text? Okay, no extra thinking needed. Can you just recall? So we're using terms like identify this aspect in line 5, for example, or state the use of something. All right, that is the kind of question you'll get. When you're looking at your second level of understanding, we're dealing with, can you now read something and then organize the facts in a particular order? All right, so we'll say provide evidence of this, for example, in a question. We don't really get it very often, but there is that opportunity where we can test you with regards to your reorganization skills. Then we get to the ones that are a little bit more, let's say, in-depth in terms of trying to get into your mindset. See what you are experiencing when you read or interact with certain texts. Now, if you're looking at your level 3, remember that's the inferential one, where we're going to see, can you draw a conclusion from what you've read? So, for example, if you're dealing with a topic in the media right now that is maybe contentious or difficult to understand, that kind of thing, we would test to see if you've read that particular piece of work and can you draw a solution or a conclusion from what that writer is talking about. All right, so we would use words like explain, or what do you think the writer means by using these particular words. Then we go to the next level of the evaluative, and then the last one, which is the appreciative one. Now, the one on level 4, which is your evaluation skills, we want to say or see from you, when you've read these things, you've drawn the conclusion, can you now tell us why you had that particular conclusion? All right, so can you give us a discussion as to how you got to that viewpoint, and then make us understand why you hold that viewpoint? And then the level 5 one is then testing to see what is the emotional impact on you as the reader. So based on what you have read and interacted with in that particular setting, we want to then see what is its impact on your thinking going forward from there. All right, so that's how we would get a holistic idea of you as a learner, if you're able to progress to the next level or not. Now, when dealing with visual literacy, and particularly dealing with your adverts and your cartoons, we are going to look at in this lesson, what is the purpose of the advert? What's the purpose of the cartoon? How does certain aspects like the AIDA principle affect your understanding of an advert, for example? And then how do other aspects of a cartoon, like maybe a single frame versus a series of frames, how would those things impact you when you are reading the contents of the cartoon? All right. Then we'll also look at the meta language, meaning all of the difficult terms and the different terms we want to get you to understand when dealing with the advert or cartoon. All right, and then we're going to look at how to analyze these things and then basically come back to see if we're going to be able to pass this when we are being tested. Right, so when we're looking at the previous exams, particularly in 2024, we found that many candidates were just lifting responses from the text. All right, so there isn't showing or much showing of an understanding of what that text is saying. There's also this difficulty of identifying a particular tone that artist or when the advert's using or that cartoonist is using when he's depicting the characters. So that needs to come out more clearly in your understanding. And then what's happening is that when we're dealing with identification, the explanation is not coming out clearly as well. So we need you to think carefully when you're answering questions with regards to tone, and then understand, can you justify that that is an appropriate tone that is being used in the advert or the cartoon? So that is where we're looking for that critical understanding. So remember, with any of these things, we're taking the visual that we see and we're linking it in terms of the image that is in front of us. Okay, so an image that's there are words, for example, or there's no words, just a text, a spoken word, for example. Then you need to be able to see what is going on in these particular things. So we found that previously candidates found it difficult to link the visual to the claims made by the advertiser. All right, and that's where they lost their marks. So when we're looking a little bit further, remember, an advert is a visual text. So there will be some kind of written text, or they may not be text, but we usually do have text in it, okay? Now, an advert is done by an advertiser, you're all aware of that, but more importantly, they are trying to get their viewpoint across. Either they're selling a product or they are raising awareness for a cause that is happening in society, for example, okay? Like the Nelson Mandela Fund. Advertising, again, as I mentioned, is not always about selling a product, but also trying to generate support. Now, if you're looking at the purpose of the advert, you need to understand that there's two elements that we're dealing with in terms of the advert. And that is, firstly, it is based on an emotive response. So it means that it's interfering with your emotions. It is meant to appeal to you in a positive way so that you can do something. All right. However, it can also appeal in terms of a negative way where you now take it upon yourself to act against that. All right. So the way in which the advertiser is going to showcase his advert can either be to stir you positively or negatively to a particular viewpoint. Right. There is also that aspect of being very much a persuasive piece. So it means that you're trying to get someone to buy into your idea. So the advertiser is doing just that when he is advertising something. Right. So those two aspects are very important in your understanding. Now, when you've been dealing with adverts over your years at school, hopefully you've come across the AIDA principle. Now, when we're looking at the AIDA principle, we're looking at four important things in that particular principle. The first thing is, what is contained within the text that is going to grab your attention? All right. Maybe it's to do with the layout of the piece of work. Maybe it's the font that's being used. Maybe an image that's included within that particular advert that could conjure up a different response. All right. There is something that the advertiser will use to attract you, being the target audience. All right. So you need to look at that. The second aspect is then interest. what is it, again, that's contained within that piece of work that is going to create the interest and make me want to read further? All right. So there'll be a certain message that he or she will be portraying and will want you to continue reading further to get more information. Then we're dealing with the desire. Now, everything about a advert is to conjure a desire within yourself to do something. So here we want you to buy the product or buy into the service that is being rendered. So they may use a celebrity, for example, or use a very stylish car that might appeal to your senses. That kind of thing is what we're looking at. All right. And also the layout. If you're somebody who's very much finding an appeal with visual things, then you would also be very much interested in adverts when they are being showcased to you. And then we have the action. The end result of advertising is for you to take action. In other words, they want you to act immediately after what you have seen, because there's obviously a limited time at which this particular sale, for example, would be valid, or even a resource would be valid to get. Right. So when we're looking at the AIDA principle, it's been summarized here for you in terms of attention, interest, desire, and action. So basically, when we are talking about the attention, we are creating the awareness or making you interested in what is, drawing your attention to what is being showcased. We're then going to include images or text within the advert to maintain your interest. Okay? So you'll be more curious on what's going on. We're then going to create that desire within you to go and do something, eventually acting. All right? So we'll use words, language, emotive, figurative language, for example, to make you do something. So when you're dealing with an advert, grade 12s, do yourself a favor and look at it in terms of the 4 aspects, and then remember these questions. For example, when I'm asked about a question dealing with attention, I would be thinking about what is it that is being advertised here? All right? And why is it important that it's being advertised? When I look at interest, for example, I'm dealing with why do I like this particular image in terms of the product, or why do I like this particular um, service that is being rendered. There will be things within the technical details within the advert that will make us think about that. And then when I'm looking at desire, for example, I'm going to say, all right, based on what I'm seeing right here, I want to buy it or buy into that train of thought. Okay, so that is where we're dealing with that question or that statement of I want it. And then the action is to basically then go out and buy that product. Okay, so those are 4 things that you will be dealing with when dealing with the AIDA principle. Good. So further on to this, we are then going into a brief synopsis there of what these 4 things are, and you would have seen this before, and you can go through it in your spare time as well. Right. So when we're dealing with attention, now look at this particular advert, for example. Immediately, I would say to you, what is drawing your attention? The fact that there's a female face being showcased and her mouth is open wide, having a vehicle sort of going through it, showing traffic going through the mouth in this instance, okay? Or in this context, it would be obviously conversations that we have, that we're speaking to each other, and that comes out through our way of speaking via our mouth, okay? So that imagery is taken and extended to physically the image of a woman, where a showcase as a tunnel, for example, her mouth, where the vehicle or the traffic's going to go through, right? So that is a very odd image, yes, and a very odd way of showing it, but nevertheless, they can also be dealing with stereotypes that women have very big mouth, for example, and always argue, and therefore it's always open. That kind of image or understanding should come through as well. So immediately, that's what we are doing to attract your attention, okay? Then, what's next is, let's look at another one. This one here, if you're a lover of animals, in particularly a dog, for example, you'd know that you'd like to keep your pet very clean. And if there's little insects or fleas or ticks on the dog, you're going to clean that off immediately. So already the big image of the dog is attracting my attention to see what this is all about, because I love the dog, for example. Okay, so you would also be feeling like that if you're a lover of the pet or the dog. Okay, then also you will look at all of these small images of people there, for example, which would then be showcased as the tick or the fleas that are worrying the dog. Okay, because we'll read here in the bottom, front line, which is being advertised. So that's all the things you're going to look at when dealing with attention. Catchy phrases, for example, the layout and the design that I showed to you here, and also obviously unusual images. You do get dogs which are very big in size, but on the large scale of things, we do get those smaller ones that are the in-house pets, okay, not the ones outside. So it's showing obviously here that even the big breed of dog can be affected by such things as ticks and fleas. Right, now then we're going with interest. What are the two ways that we would be looking at getting your interest involved here? The first part would be the visual techniques. Okay, what is it that is within the text that attracts my attention and keeps me interested, is this part that we're focusing on. So maybe that big image of the dog in the previous one would have kept you interested because you love animals. Maybe the aspect of the female in the previous one also, where she's having her mouth wide open, that would then also keep you interested, dealing with concepts of the stereotypes. Okay, then the outlining diagrams, for example, that are there. Unusual layouts, like that one with the female is totally unusual. All right, you don't expect to see an image like that showcasing traffic. Okay, so that is again keeping my interest to go on reading further. Then the purpose of this particular advert will also be dealing with the interest, because the advertiser wants to either manipulate me or convince me or make me believe that this is the best thing ever. So he would be highlighting that to me so that I can understand what he's talking about more clearly. All right, and then there would be an emotional response, like if you love the dog, you would want to go out and make sure that your dog is also taken care of with this front line or this product that is being showcased, where he or she is safeguarded from those insects or pestilence. All right, and then on the other side with the female and the traffic one, for example, it would evoke a response because maybe there's a feminist group of people or a target that was not thought of, where they would become affected by what is being showcased. So these are the things you need to start looking at when dealing with an advert. Right, and then we've got the other part of the linguistic technique, where we're having language being used. So here we will match the language that is used to the audience that we are trying to persuade. All right, so it involves you directly when the advertiser uses certain words. So that is what is there. Right, then further on to this, we have also maybe there's sophisticated formal language for that high-end clientele. All right, so that professional clientele or that academic clientele that might be wanting to be looked at here. So we want to impress, we want to amaze, we want to surprise or convince that group of people to buy into the idea. Right, so here are examples of adverts. You would see, for example, the M sign would obviously know that it is showcasing a particular product and that it is a well-known one, okay, where we so want you to want one. Okay, that's so coming out very clearly, bolded font, as opposed to the other font in the text, would immediately grab my attention and keep me in there to read further about what is on special here. The other one here of I want you, the US Army, for example, that one would then immediately stand out. The word you would immediately stand out to me because you can see it's bolded and it's underlined in a particular color in this instance. Now, in the exams, you may not have a colored picture. So you would have the gray and the white or the black being showcased to you, right? Those color schemes used. So when it's actually very bold and it's very important information, you would see it in the black, for example, and then it would be in bold font or written in a different font, right? So those kind of things would come through. Then with the last one there on Medea's tough love, you can see that it is a big size woman that is obviously now being the disciplinarian here, and that should already pique your interest as to what is happening here, because she is a more than a large size woman than we normally used to see. All right. Also, the fact that she's grabbing children around her hands, that also will pique my interest or your interest as to see, is she really right in what she's doing or not? And as you investigate further, you'd understand a little bit more about this advertisement. Right. Then the desire part. Again, we are dealing with the emotional appeal. We want to convince you that what is being promoted is the best thing and it's going to be making a difference to your life, either to your status, for example, or making you feel safe and secure in an environment. Those kind of things come through, okay? So there's one of the BMW advert that is very much creating a desire to go and get that elegant drive, that ride with the BMW, all right? Words such as powerful, agile, intelligent. It is definitely piquing the interest of the high-end clientele. All right. Then, also words like sheer driving pleasure that they use in terms of their advertisements would also get somebody who loves to have a smooth ride in a vehicle to go and buy into the idea that the BMW would give you a better ride than the other ones. All right, other vehicles on the market. Then you've got Coca-Cola there, also definitely a brand that is known very well. So after all of that said and done, we want to take action. That's when we are being manipulated to go and do something. Right. So grade 12s, you would then see adverts like this, for example, that would say, see what's next or join free for a month. That already is saying, I am the best option if you join me right now. Even if you say 99 Rand 99, for example, that 0.1% or 0.1 Rand, okay, people would think, or 1 cent, sorry, people will think it's a bit cheaper than going and buying it for 100 Rand, for example. That kind of thing definitely draws us in and makes us want to take action. Then when you're doing your online viewing of adverts or buying stuff, you would note that the moment there's an attractive figure or a price tag that's flashing at your face, for example, then immediately you want to take action. That's the kind of techniques that the advertiser uses, right? Then there on your screen right now is aspects that you should be aware of by now, and I'm going to run through it very briefly. Product versus service being sold or being highlighted to us. Target market, you must know, is the group of people that you would be showcasing an advert to for them to buy into your idea. The brand, very much that particular name of the product or the service that is being rendered. The slogan there, the catchphrase that would be remembered. It's the most common phrase that is being used over the years for you to remember that particular product, all right, or service. Then logo, it's a symbol that's very important associated with the brand. Your written copy or your body copy is the written text in the advert. So all of this, for example, would be your body copy, all right? Then the visual copy will be the image that is there, like this one over here, okay, of the rhino. Good. And then the layout would then be referring to how the written or the visual text are placed within that advert. So you would note, for example, here the rhino coming out more at you than the words that are in the smaller boxes over here. All right. So he is the focal point because, or she, it could be a female as well, because the rhino is obviously in danger in this particular advert, and we're trying to stop the carnage that is going on with killing of the rhinos, okay? And then rescue our rhinos obviously is that particular important logo or important catchphrase that they work with there, where they um, attract our attention. Obviously, the symbol here is of the rhino. That would be immediately dealing with what we need to do, okay? The symbol associated with the brand, okay? The logo. Good. Then, when we're looking at the types of language, I mentioned this before. I'm just going to run through again. Remember, we have informative language where it's informing. The language that's being used is informing the viewer or the reader, sorry, of what this product is all about. So there will be jargon also used. That's the technical terms within that industry that is used to attract those clients, okay? Then you've got the informal language, which is the one that we're using every day to communicate. And that will be less sophisticated. In other words, simple sentences just to get us to agree to something or disagree to something. In this case, to buy something or not to buy something, okay? Then you've got the emotive language, which is very important, okay, linked to your figurative language, all right? So emotive, it's appeals and it's persuasive. So it's words, the choice of words that's used to interfere with our emotions. It is persuading us to do or believe in a particular viewpoint. When we're looking at the figurative language, there we're saying the use of the figures of speech, for example, is what we're looking at, because that will captivate my interest in reading this particular piece. Right. So the advertising again deals with our message versus the emotive words being used. A target audience, that's the group of people that we are showcasing things to. It must contain a verbal and a visual clue. In other words, the spoken word and the image we are seeing would be important. The logo and the slogan, remember the catchphrase as opposed to the symbol that we are using for a particular product. Punctuation and figures of speech, that is coming down now in terms of the types of language we are using to showcase our product. And then the rhetorical questions, obviously part of your devices used, okay? So when we're looking at a fairly straightforward response, a description of what's happening in that advert, we are looking at what is the type of visual being used and what are the details I'm seeing in that particular advert. When I'm asking you to interpret what is happening in the advert, I'm saying, can you see the literal meaning versus the figurative meaning of the text? Can you see that there's an intended audience for this particular brand? Why am I having that particular audience that is being intended for this product? And then the evaluative part, where that level 3, 4, and 5 is coming from, I want to see, can you base your understanding of this text on what you are seeing? Can you base it on evidence in that text and then substantiate why it is a valid view that you are holding? Right. So there's an example of an advert that was in the previous NSC exam. It was talking about the Alpha hospitals and that state of mind when we're dealing with bullying as an issue. All right. Look at the play on the words, spot it and stop it. Immediately also notice the change in the font sizes, okay, that is happening there. From that to the bottom part, which is now the words stating bullying is persistent, intimidating, humiliating behavior which attempts to undermine someone, right? So in this particular hospital, they are dealing with aspects of bullying and they want to showcase to us how to stop it. So you need to identify with it first and then stop it from occurring going forward. Right. So there's a little text also being written out for you. You'll see this in your NSC exams and in your test. We will always give you the text box with the information in case you do not understand or you cannot read the small font that is being used. All right. So it says speak up and speak out if you are being bullied, or if you know someone who is being bullied. Speak to your manager and or HR, who will be supportive and helpful in finding the right way through. Try to sort the issue informally first of all. Make a formal complaint to your line manager, hospital director, or HR manager, and then raise the issue on the staff feedback website with direct access to the CEO. So you can see within this hospital, there have been an increased number of maybe examples of bullying. And they are now talking to the staff, for example, on how to curb this from occurring. Right. Take that a little bit further and think about it in real life, how this would be playing out in society. So that image, look at the arm that is stretched over, the image here of a man. In this case, we have the puppet and the puppeteer. All right. And when you are being the puppet, you would be acting in terms of what the puppeteer wants you to do or say. Take that idea, that imagery, and liken it to a bully. A bully forces you to do certain things. So in that case, you would be the puppet and he or she would be the puppeteer, making you do certain things. So when you break free from it, that is shown by that snapping of that particular strings. Once you break free from it, you've identified with it and break out of it, then you are free to be your own person. And these are just ideas that you should be getting when you look at an advert immediately. All right. So you should be practicing now, grade 12s, with all of the adverts you are seeing on TV, for example, or in the magazines you are reading, or with social media, in terms of maybe you are on your various chat sites or whatever it is. When you see an advert, start engaging with it like this. All right. So let's see what questions appeared in the NSC exam. It said, for example, account for the tone of the headline, bullying, spot it and stop it. Notice the exclamation mark. It is asking us to look at account and tone. So the moment you get a question, you need to highlight or underline what the question word is. So this is the question term. Oops, my writing. All right. And then the tone, obviously, you are knowing that this is the writers or the advertisers. Advertisers purpose. Okay. He's obviously used that particular tone in terms of what he wants to get across to us. Right. So what kind of tone did he use in this instance is what we are talking about. When you look at the word spot it and stop it, it is very much a commanding tone. In other words, do it and stop it. All right? It's assertive. It's commanding. So we already got a mark for an answer saying it's a commanding tone, and it makes me act in a particular way. So in this case, it is forcing me to report bullying and therefore curtailing it, meaning stopping the bullying from occurring. So we're going to award 1 mark for the identification of the tone and 1 mark for the explanation. And that is how usually we would be marking a question like that. So you identify the tone and then you give us the explanation as to why that tone is appropriate. Okay, so there's an answer for account. Basically, recalling, little bit of reorganization. Can you understand that this is what the tone is? And then obviously, how would we react against that? Okay, second question, discuss the suitability of the illustration in the text in conveying the message of the advertiser. So there's 3 aspects here. Firstly, we want a discussion on what? Whether the illustration in the text is suitable or not in relation to the message of the advertiser. Okay, so 3 things. So we're going to firstly think in our heads. All right, there is an illustration of the puppet and the puppeteer, and it's showing us what bullying is all about. And then, is that suitable for the topic that is being spoken about? And does it also tie in with the what the advertiser wants to say to me as the reader? And that's the 3 marks we're looking for. All right. So the first part of the answer says, the victim of bullying is depicted as the puppet and the bully as the puppeteer. I've spoken about that. By severing the strings or the cutting of the strings, the victim is taking control or taking a stand and attempting to break free of the cycle of bullying. All right? So that in itself is giving us the understanding of the text. Then we go on to say our comment. The power of the bully is suggested by the larger than life arm, which I spoke to you there about. All right. He is in a domineering position above the victim. So obviously the puppeteer is here and he's interfering with the movements of the puppet via the strings. All right. Manipulating the movement. The silhouette of the victim, a faceless representation of any employee, appeals to a wide audience. The point driven home is that the victim of bullying is the only person who can stop the cycle. So, if you give us any of those 3 ideas, it then means that you've understood what is being said in this particular text and you've given us a critical answer or a critical diagnosis of that answer, of the text. So you then get 3 marks for 2 ideas well discussed. So the moment we talk about the puppeteer and the puppet image and what's happening there with cyberbullying or with bullying, for example, and how to stop it, we already got the discussion going on. We got the fact that we understood what it is all about. And then the comment, obviously, in terms of whether the advertiser has gotten his message to this, obviously you can agree that yes, he has, because that faceless image, for example, is showcasing that anyone can experience this. And if they only stop it by breaking away from it, they would be taking control of the situation. And that's where our 3 marks are going to come in. All right. Then the same advert being spoken about here. Comment on 2 techniques that the advertiser has used in the written text to influence the reader. So I want 2 techniques that influence the reader. Okay, and I want a comment. There's my 3 marks. So the mark allocation is a guideline for how many ideas I'm looking for. All right. So firstly, if we're looking at the fonts, they are done in different sizes for us to show the information that is important versus the less important information. If I'm looking at the different font sizes, and the bold font size will arrest the reader's attention. That in itself will get the 3 marks. Okay? The third one, the use of the pronouns, for example, you and your, urges the reader to act against bullying. That's 3 marks. The layout allows the reader to follow the logical sequence, identifying the problem, defining it, and being presented with the steps to alleviate the problem. That is where our 2nd mark comes in, and the layout, there, and then identifying and defining the problem would be the 3rd mark. Right, then the reverse print, that's my technique. White print on black background. What does it do? It draws the attention to the context in the text box and it emphasizes the important points for consideration. 3 marks just for that. So you see, once we understand what the question is asking of us, we can get 3 marks very easily. Right. Then there's also alliteration there. Spot and stop. The repetition of the S sound there. The catchphrase is resonating with the target audience. Assonance, again with the O and the O in spot and stop, enhances the rhyme of that particular headline and it makes it smooth and flowing. 3 marks there. Repetition of the word speak, okay, reinforces the persuasive impact of the advert. That's an example given there. And it goes on with the emotive diction, that one there, juxtaposing the ideal situation. Our hospital, dignity, respect, all those words are playing on our emotions, dealing with the harsh reality of being bullied. All right. Because bullying is obviously persistent. It's an intimidatory technique to shy away from what you also cannot do in life. So if that particular bully is having a shortfall in a particular part of his life or her life, they would then bully the so-called weaker one, and then they would get success or be happy with that if they get success from that. Okay, so that is 3 marks only if the comment is given and substantiated. Right, 3.4, and you would notice that even in the cartoons we deal with these kind of things, the language questions, and this is the one of provide a suitable synonym for intimidating in context. Any of these words would be acceptable. So it's threatening, it's menacing, it's frightening. These are things that happen when there is intimidation taking place. So you find a synonym and look at the way, the tense, of the sentence as well, and make sure it fits in that context, your answer. If it doesn't, then obviously it's going to be wrong, and it will be marked wrong because it's not done with the context in mind. All right. And then the part of speech, 3.5, raise the issue on the staff feedback website. Provide the part of speech for staff in the sentence above. And then obviously that is the adjective. All right, 1 mark for that, giving us 10 marks for that advert. Right, very easy to understand if we go through the hints and the tips I've given to you thus far. Now we're looking at cartoons. This is the single frame versus the series of frames where all the actions taking place. That's a brief synopsis of what a cartoon is. Now, what we found in the last year's exams and previous exams as well is that learners again are struggling with the tone used in the cartoon. So the characters are speaking and there's a tone that is being showcased through the speech of the cartoon characters. It's not coming through in the answers, or the understanding by the candidates is not clear. There's also a poor interpretation of questions. So not all aspects have been answered. Again, it comes down to the question words we went through, like we did with the advert. Poor knowledge of cartoon techniques. I'm going to take you through a few techniques here, and we're going to see if we understand that. And then the terminology of the cartoons are not always understood. So you need to go back and look at aspects of a stereotype. What is a stereotype? When do we showcase sarcasm? When do we showcase irony, for example? When is caricature involved in a cartoon? All of those things, grade 12s, is important. So when dealing with the cartoon, you need to know it's a piece of art that's all usually meant to be humorous. So it's to bring out humor in a situation. All right? The way the humor might come out might be very much in a mocking way or a sarcastic way, or it could just be a play on words. Those kind of things you deal with when you have the actual text in front of you. So in your head, you should understand that the cartoon is there for the cartoonist to express his ideas or his viewpoint on a particular issue that's happening in society. So he draws your attention again to that aspect. He would do that maybe by including an image that you are aware of, or maybe a celebrity figure that you are aware of. They also usually deal with current social or political issues in the community. Now, usually you'd find that we try and steer clear of these contentious issues, but with cartoons, those issues are tackled head on. But it's done so in a light-hearted way, raising the awareness of the serious issue, but sort of downplaying it when it is in a cartoon, so that you understand it's an important issue and there's ways to deal with it. And obviously we'll get you to do that. Right. So the stereotypes used in a particular cartoon are very visible when you go through the frames. That is when we're dealing with a fixed viewpoint, an exaggerated viewpoint, or a preconceived viewpoint of a specific group of people, a nation, or a group that is being showcased. So, single frame, in other words, all the actions happening in the one frame there where you see everything, it's done and dusted. When there's a series of frames, that would then be a cartoon strip. All right. And then there's action happening from frame 1, for example, all the way to frame 4. Right. This here is obviously where you would find the comic strip on the internet if you're going through. And then this is obviously the signature there of the cartoonist. Right. So let's look at this in depth now. When we're looking at the cartoon, the purpose of the cartoon has to be understood, grade 12s. Why do we use cartoons? We use it to showcase a complex story in a few images that are contained in particular frames. So there's a narrative, there's a story that the cartoonist wants to say to us or give to us, and that comes through in frame 1 going on to frame 4 or 5, for example. It can even go on to maybe frame 10. So previously you would see in the NSC exam papers there were long cartoons, yes, and that's how they use the cartoons to get a particular viewpoint across. Okay, so when the artist is busy with his cartoon strip, he's going to have a message that he wants to give us, and he's going to use the limited way as possible to get it to us. But sometimes it might be so serious that to get that idea across, you got to use more space. Okay, and that's where you'd have more frames involved in this. So there's a large amount of information that is shared within a short space of time in the cartoon strip. So that's also why it would go on for 10 frames, for example. So many issues are dealt with in the cartoon strip. We can deal with aspects like racism, sexism, feminism, issues regarding relationships and how to make sure they work well or they don't work well. We can deal with other variations of diseases that might be showcasing themselves now in society. That is a spin-off from the COVID pandemic that we had experienced previously. There'll also be issues of maybe where the gender roles have been, become blur in society, where people have been taking, women have taken on different roles versus men taking on different roles, and how we as society perceive those things happening. And all of that is dealt with in a cartoon strip in a comical way, yes, but raising the awareness of the serious issues that are dealt with when this happens, okay, in society. So the basic structure, again, there's it there for you, the name of the cartoon, right? Then we've got these things here, the squares, for example, are your frames, okay? And that's what's showcased to you. Within that, we've got these characters, these figurative characters, obviously being, in this case, Garfield and his owner. And then that's the characters there, all right? And then you've got text, words that have been spoken and words that have been thought. Now, so when you're going through with me just now with the various types of bubbles that are being used, right? I will take you through what each of the bubbles are meaning, and then you should be knowing as well by now that this bubble means that bubble means that. And then you can obviously understand what is being showcased in the cartoon. Right. So a text box, grade 12s, will always be there to set the scene in motion. So as it starts playing out, you will see the text box. Okay. The frame is normally the shape of the square I showed to you there, and that helps to build a sense of time and space in which these events are taking place. The gutter is that space between the frame and the actual text box, all right? That is now for us to sort of fill in the gap our ideas should be coming through from frame 1 to frame 3 to frame 4. So we can make assumptions. We can think about what's happening or what's going to happen in the next frame or 2. Right. Further on to that, we've got the next part, which is the characters. And with the characters, I showed you there Garfield and his owner, for example. They are figurative characters around which an action or event takes place. And then the punchline is usually when you're saying a joke, eventually that last few words you use is the punchline. And in the cartoon, we have the final line of a joke that is showcasing the punchline, and that's usually a few words of a story, and then we get the message through that. Right. So the basic structure of the cartoons in terms of the speech bubble, that's what the speech bubble looks like. Remember, it's completely drawn. All right. There's no breaks in this particular bubble. And that is when the direct words of the cartoon image is being showcased to you, right? The moment we get the breaking or broken lines here in that particular bubble, it is referring to our whisper bubble. So that is when there's 2 or more characters involved in a conversation immediately, right? Then the third one here, notice this like an ellipsis, the 3 dots, and then also a concrete or complete cloud there, or a complete bubble. That is the thought bubble. In other words, the words that are in the mind of the character. He hasn't spoken it, but he's thinking those things, all right? And then the jagged edge one, which is almost like outward movement, showing the emotional reactions of the character that is involved. All right. So that is the 4 or 5 types of bubbles. Now, look at the language in cartoons, grade 12s. These are the terms that you would be showcasing or looking at when you're dealing with the cartoon. Specific terminology like the gutter versus the frame versus the fictional image versus other things like humor, satire, sarcasm, puns, all of those terms, right? So when dealing with the puns, for example, remember everything in the cartoon is meant to create a light-hearted effect of what's being showcased. So with the puns, we have that play on the words that is there, and then there's an example there of a bullet that has been drawn, and then, or a group of them, sorry, and then the one that has been shot, or in other words, it's been fired, then would then be showcased as obviously not having the head that is showcased in the other ones, right? So what happened to you is the question asked, and he then says, I got fired. All right. So it has been released from the barrel of the gun, and therefore that's what he's meaning. But it's made light of with the play of the words in terms of being fired. I've been let go of. All right. So that workplace humor coming through there. Then satire, this example is obviously exaggerating or mocking the wrong to imply that it is right. Okay, that is satire. Okay, remember that, mocking. For example, don't shoot. Look at the images there. We've got a cameraman with the camera and he does a shoot. Hey, and then we've got the person who is obviously the terrorist here, who's going to shoot the people down, and then here he's got a gun which is going to now fire off. So don't shoot is that play on the words there of the both meanings that you're going to look at. All right. And then obviously the hands of the image, the hands of the images that are showcased here is raised, the humans, right? So link this technical concept to the visual and the verbal elements. So you're looking at both of the visual and the verbal to understand the pun in this instance, all right? So you've got to discuss both the visual and the verbal clue when we are dealing with a satire and pun and all of those things, all right? Then the other types of language being used, the irony or the structures and conventions. When we're dealing with irony, that concept is when we're using words that are opposite of what is really meant. And it's often done to make something humorous. All right? Sarcasm is to mock someone in a hurtful way. And in this instance, people use it to say the opposite of what's true to make someone look or feel foolish. All right. So notice that one is humorous and one is not so humorous. Okay. Now, irony versus sarcasm showcased to you there, and you'd see how it is done. For example, irony, lovely weather out today. There's raindrops falling on both sides, and the umbrella there obviously is supposed to be used to cover you or shield you from the water. And then in terms of sarcasm would be great choice for an umbrella. Okay, because obviously trying to make you look foolish or stupid because you're saying there's great weather out there, but actually it's not so great. Good. Then stereotypes. We're dealing with stereotypes versus your caricature, right? So your stereotypes, remember, is that general exaggerated viewpoint of a particular group of people or a person. So this is where we now have the showcasing of a person when tackling with stereotyping, and that aspect of stereotyping. So this is based on what a person is or how we experience him when we interact with him, right? So here is the idea of what happens in the masculine brain compared to the feminine brain. The stereotype is that men are usually logical, rational, aggressive, exploitative, strategic in their planning, the boss or the decision maker. That is the generalized stereotype, okay? And the feminine side of things, the woman, usually intuitive, emotional, submissive, a faithful supporter, all right? These roles can interchange, and that is what happens in society. So we're dealing with a stereotype here that needs to be broken down when we are trying to understand what the text is showcasing to us. All right. Then the character is a character who represents somebody in society. The cartoonist achieves this by overly emphasizing certain aspects of a person. All right. Look at that example there of Will Smith, for example, where he's known to have the bigger ears and the big forehead for it that he's obviously known for. And that is how we would then take the certain features and exaggerate it, make it bigger than it actually is to get our humorous effect coming out of the cartoon. Right. Then we've got this image here of Tom and Jerry. So we always know that the one is targeting the other one. All right. The mouse always wins over the cat, for example. And when they are doing this, the mouse is obviously hurting Tom. All right. And although Tom is the bigger one and he's supposed to be getting success, Jerry obviously is the one that's getting success because he is ingenuine and he goes out and sorts out Tom in the quickest way possible. Right. Then look at these lines that are going out there. Okay. Those are the motion lines showing what's happening with the character. So the body language in this instance gives us information about the character and how he or she is speaking, his mood. You may refer to the position of his arms or legs, and that in relation to another character in the frame. So look at the way in which Jerry has kicked. Let's go back on this. Sorry, let's see if I can go back. Here we go. Okay, so I can't erase that particular red at the moment. So if you're looking at Jerry, when he kicks Tom, there's the lines of motion showed to you there. But more importantly, his one leg is obviously raised in motion towards kicking Tom. All right? So that is how it look at the body language. So how do we normally read body language? There's an image for you there that you need to look at. Right? An open gesture, for example, would mean something. The closed arms gesture would mean something. Maybe blocking somebody off from your personal space. All right. When somebody is slouched in their position, are they interested or not interested in what you're saying? Usually signaling their interest, they're leaning forward into you. If they, for example, are touching their nose, that could be indicative of lying about something, okay? If you're having a serious conversation with somebody. If there's also the stance of the way in which they're standing or they're sitting could also give up certain ideas that we hold about the body language of the character. So, when dealing with facial expression, remember it is an important clue about what the character is feeling. So, his tone is coming out very clearly in what you see on the face. All right. So, what he is saying or what he's talking about will be showcased by his facial features, his expressions. So, the feelings are shown on his face. Remember that. So, can you maybe, grade 12s, think about other instances where you would be seeing an image and being able to then pick out a word from your vocabulary to describe the tone of that character? So let's look at this one. How would you showcase someone who's terrified? Usually they would have that open aspect of the mouth. The features on the face would obviously then be here where it is elongated, open nostrils being showcased, and eyes wide open. All right. Someone who is terrified would be showcased like that. Someone who is scared about something, another word that is similar to terrified, would also be showcased as having their fingers in their mouth, right? But again, we're looking at the facial features, and there you've got the open, wide open eyes, and again, the elongated features of the forehead there. All right. Then the next one is, let's look at another one maybe. An example of being alarmed. How would you do that or showcase it? Someone like SpongeBob, for example, right? You're about to attack somebody because you're so shocked at what's going on or alarmed by it. And then obviously, again, the open eyes and the mouth, obviously gesturing certain things here as well of screaming out in alarm. Right. Then maybe you need to also look at other words that you would come across. For example, spooked. All right. How would you showcase someone being spooked? That's an example there again of your oval mouth, right? Shocked or spooked about something. Someone who's loving, how would you showcase that tone? Again, that image there of the two kissing each other can come through. And then someone who's irritated, could that maybe be an image for irritated? You think about it and think whether it's possible that someone who's irritated would be like this, like what's going on kind of thing. That could be a way to showcase that. And then someone who is having the tone of happiness, would that be something that they would look like? A smile on their face, softer look as opposed to more of a rigid look, that kind of thing. The smile on the face, the eyes even getting smaller as they smile. All right. So again, remember we're looking at the facial features here to get the idea. Right. So how do you analyze the cartoons? Firstly, we look at the characters and what they are doing. So are they characters or are they caricatures? We look at the background and the setting of the particular cartoon strip. Where is it happening and what action is taking place, okay? The language that's being used in the text. Is it a formal language or an informal kind of language being used? How are the sentences structured, for example? The punctuation, oops, let's go back. Punctuation marks, look at the exclamation marks, for example, there. They are used to showcase the emotions of the characters. Look at actions. Look at the facial expressions and the symbols or lines that are being used that are showcased to you there, showing the emotions and the movements, all right? The objectives. Is it the aim of the cartoonist to inform us about something or educate us about something or entertain us about something, with something? Is there also movement lines being used? Are they vertical? Are they curved? Are they diagonal in their structure? It's going to show us various ways of movement that the characters are moving in while they are going through this journey in this particular frames. The speedy action is indicated by that streaky lines, for example, or an action of leaving the frame, the speeding off away. The font also could be then changed to show emphasis, right? Now, this one appeared in the NSC exams a while back. Let me go back there. Of the character, oops, of Curtis, and he has a teacher who is sick in hospital, and he obviously was very affectionate with this teacher. I'm just not summarizing for you what's happening in here. Very attached to the teacher. The teacher has now been hospitalized, and he or she is he's worried about his teacher's well-being. Yeah, so he pretends to be a loved one who is calling the hospital. All right. So in frame 1, it goes on to say, this is Mrs. Nelson's father, and I want to hear my baby girl's health condition. And right now, look at now has been bolded for emphasis here. So look at exclamation mark and question mark and exclamation mark there in the same frame. In a deep voice, he is talking like that because he's pretending to be the father of the teacher. No, I don't know her first name. No, I don't know her birth date. Just let me hear something here. So now, think about the fact that it's the father that's phony, and he doesn't know his daughter's first name. And obviously that is going to be a concern, okay? He doesn't know her birth date either. So is he actually the father? We got to obviously wonder about that, right? And he's getting agitated about what's happening here. Then in frame 3, he's just having the phone next to his ear and he's just waiting for a response. Then in frame 4, I can't repeat what I heard. Back to regular voice of Curtis. So now Curtis is speaking to his father, obviously here, and he says, well, I can't repeat. Notice that there is the broken lines in that particular bubble, all right? And you got to know by now what that is meaning. Good. Then we've got, with the social distancing policies, we can't visit your teacher in the hospital. So this is the dad trying to explain to his son why we can't go to the hospital. In frame 6, oh, she'll be all right. Mrs. Nelson is a tough old lady, right? Now notice that from his despondent look throughout frame 1 to frame 4, suddenly now he's got this sort of positive viewpoint that she will be fine because she's fought through so many other things and she'll be okay right now, right? There's also the motion lines with that fist showing that there is a positive viewpoint coming across. That's it, Curtis, a positive attitude. And then the dad hugs him, obviously, and he's very happy with what his son is going through. But then in frame 8, notice that although Curtis is being showcased as being confident and happy with what he's heard and things, in actual fact, he is demoralized. He's demotivated by what he has heard on the phone about Mrs. Nelson. Right. So the question on 4.1 was, account for the boy's intention in using the phrases all right and a tough old lady in frame 6. All right. So firstly, 2 marks, we want 2 ideas or 1 idea explained very clearly. So we're looking at the intention of the boy. Intention is to do what? Convince himself that his teacher is well and will be okay. That is already 2 marks. Okay? Because all right, she's a tough old lady will showcase that he's convincing himself that she will be fine. 2 marks just for that. He wants to give his father the impression that he is confident that she will recover. Again, another 2 marks for that. A straight recalling information to say, this is what Curtis went through, and he believes his teacher is going to be well because he knows her to be a tough old lady. That idea will come through. 2 marks there. Right. The next one, is to then look at the next question. There we go. Critically discuss the effectiveness of frame 8 as a conclusion to the cartoon. Critically discuss meaning look at the impact that this cartoon strip had on you, and particularly focus at grade 12 level here in terms of frame 8. Remember, that's where the father is hugging Curtis, who is pretending to be confident, but in actual fact, he's demoralized. So, frame 8 is anticlimactic. That's what I said there. Since the boy's initial bluster, followed by his brave facade, ends when he comes to terms with his teacher's condition. All right? So, in other words, he has realized that she's not going to be well because of what he heard. He couldn't repeat that to his father, so he pretended to be confident and pretended to be okay, but that's not the case. The boy becomes emotional when the truth dawns on him. Obviously, his teacher is not going to be well. The role reversal depicted in frame 4 and 6 falls away in the final frame, where he finds solace in his father's embrace. So just for explaining that how this build up was that the teacher will be fine and that she's a strong lady, and he's confidently believing that. And then what happens? The turning point, the anticlimax, is that she's not going to be fine. And him pretending that he's okay with what he's heard is where we are led to believe it's all okay. But then in frame 8, we see it's not okay because he realizes that she's not going to be fine, and the only solace is the hug that his father gives him. And that's where that critical analysis comes in of the last frame of this cartoon. And that's how you will discuss it for 3 marks. Okay. Then rewrite frame 5 in reported speech. Okay, that again is the language question. You will see that appearing for 2 marks. Any of the language structures we deal with. Okay. So it says, begin with Curtis's father. So we go back to frame 5. We look at the sentence and we give the answer. The answer would have been changed like this. Curtis's father said that, 1 mark, with social distancing policies, they could not or couldn't visit his or Curtis's teacher in the hospital. So everything has been changed to the past tense, and therefore, all aspects sorted out, we will get 2 marks for this. All right. So there's a directive there given to the marker on how to mark. Now let's look at another cartoon strip quickly there. A 1 frame, a single frame, all the action happening in that frame. Tell me the truth, John. There's someone else, isn't there? So here's a couple that is together, and you can see her facial expression is showing you that she's very distraught about what's happening with her partner, John. Although they're sitting on this rocking chair and supposed to be intimate with each other and, share the space together, in actual fact, it's not what is happening. So comment on the cartoonist's use of satire in text F, right? Satire, remember, it's mocking something, making light of a serious issue. We are saying that the cartoonist ridicules the manner in which narcissism has encroached on relationships. So he is more in love with himself than he is in love with his partner, showcased by the mirror that he's staring into all the time, not even interested in what his partner's going through. All right? The young man is self-absorbed and paying no attention to the woman. The satirical point is driven home when the woman thinks that there's a third party in the relationship, which is not the case, obviously. It's just that she's with a narcissist who is very involved in his own life and his own looks. However, the young man's vanity or self-love is evident by the gazes of himself in the mirror, and that is the reason for his lack of attention to his partner. So that discussion will give you 3 marks there. So look at the 1 cartoon image compared to the other cartoon image, how they interrelate with each other. Is it a good thing or a bad thing being showcased? And explain in the answer what is being showcased. All right, that would give you the 3 marks. And then to show also the mockery of something that is serious. Partners like to be in each other's company. They want to be loved, they want to be held, they want to be consoled. But then if someone in the one party is totally involved in his own life or her own life, then the other one gets neglected. And that's the issue being showcased here. A serious one being showcased in a light manner. All right. So please remember, grade 12s, when looking at the cartoons or the adverts, look carefully at what is being showcased and look at what grabs your attention and what makes you read further. Look at the cartoon strip in terms of the cartoons, the characters' body language and their facial expression. Look at the language being used throughout the cartoon strip or the comic strip. Look at the punctuation marks. Why is he using the exclamation mark as opposed to the question mark? If they're next to each other, why is that the case? Look at the font that is more bold than the other font in the text. Maybe capitalized as opposed to the lowercase, all right, of words. Investigate the setting and the background details. Identify when the viewer's expectations are overturned to create humor. And then investigate the text to find the intention of the cartoonist. All right. So these are things that you need to go back and look at, please, learners, and then you would be able to analyze a cartoon or an advert. So I want to thank you so much for joining me for this lesson this afternoon. It's been totally a pleasure showcasing these things to you and trying to get you to understand these aspects, and hopefully you take it forward and use it when you're being assessed in your March tests as well and in your June examination. So all the best, grade 12s, until I see you next week for another lesson in English home language. Take care until then.